Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're completely tearing down the usual self-help cliches and digging into a truly no-nonsense framework for breaking through your personal and professional plateaus. Look, if you're tired of listening to lifestyle gurus who promise the world but just spout fluffy buzzwords without any real delivery, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to unpack the core concepts of Grant Cardone's famous 10x rule. It's an incredibly direct, almost mathematical methodology designed to help you completely bypass average and achieve lasting, massive success. But first, let me ask you, have you ever struggled to achieve success? No matter how hard you try or how many hours you put in, it can just be incredibly frustrating when you fall short, right? Well, you're certainly not alone in that. The problem usually isn't a lack of desire, it's a lack of the right methodology. And that's exactly what the 10x rule promises to fix, by offering a completely different way to approach your goals. It's not about crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. It's about applying a concrete, almost mathematical framework to your effort and your ambition. So here's our roadmap for today's masterclass. First, escaping the average trap. Second, what is the 10x rule? Third, the 4 degrees of action. Fourth, the power of obsession. And finally, choosing meaningful targets. Part 1, escaping the average trap. Before we can really build up, we have to challenge literally everything you've been taught about setting realistic expectations. The world is absolutely full of average everything. Most people aim for what the source calls a middle-class mindset, which essentially just means thinking only about getting by. They want to be comfortable, they want to do just enough. But aiming for average is actually highly dangerous. Why? Because when you aim for average, any slight disruption, a random economic downturn or an unexpected crisis, can instantly sink you to below average. Aiming for just enough leaves you completely vulnerable. To avoid this trap, the 10x framework argues that you must define what average means in your specific context, your industry, your life, and immediately decide to aim 10 times higher than that. And as you do this, you absolutely must remember that success isn't a zero-sum game. A lot of people hold on to this limiting belief that success is only for other people, or that if you succeed, you're somehow taking away from someone else. Cardone argues that you have to let that go immediately. There is plenty of success to go around. When you achieve your massive goals, you're actually making a positive contribution to society and benefiting everyone around you. In fact, the author applied this exact mindset to overcome severe personal challenges, including addiction, totally transforming his life to reach his true potential. According to this framework, success isn't just nice to have, it's your duty, and it benefits us all. All right, moving on to part 2. What exactly is the 10x rule? Okay, let's dive into this. The 10x rule is essentially a massive twofold upgrade. First, it requires a huge upgrade in physical effort, meaning investing 10 times more effort, energy, and resources than you originally thought was necessary. Second, it requires an upgrade in mental ambition. Your goals must be 10 times bigger than what is considered realistic. The rule dictates that you absolutely do not settle for easy wins or mediocrity. You literally shoot for the moon and pick a goal that honestly seems impossible to achieve. Just think about the math for a second when it comes to practical effort. If your standard plan is to make, say, 10 phone calls a day to sell your product or grow your network, the 10x rule dictates that you completely scrap that plan and aim for 100 phone calls a day instead. It's about multiplying your standard expected business effort by 10 to guarantee you break through the noise. It's a massive shift in sheer volume. So the crucial point here is how this changes your overall trajectory, even if things don't go perfectly. Consider the difference between a mediocre goal, like writing a 2-page short story, and a massive 10x goal, like writing a full novel. Let's say you shoot for the novel, and you fall short. You hit a roadblock, and actually, let's just say you only get out 50 pages. Even though you fell short of that ambitious 10x goal, you have still accomplished vastly more than if you had perfectly executed that mediocre 2-page goal. By dreaming bigger and trying harder than you thought possible, your failures are still way bigger than an average person's successes. Part 3, the 4 degrees of action. Let's see how this all builds into our next core concept. You've got the mindset, but now, what action is actually required to execute the 10x rule? Well, when you're faced with a challenging situation, you really only have 4 options. Option 1, do nothing. Option 2, retreat. Option 3, take normal action. Now, the framework considers those first 3 options as absolute failures. They will only lead you right back to that dangerous, vulnerable average we talked about earlier. The only true path to success, the only option that actually works, is option number 4, take massive action. So let's define exactly what massive action looks like. It means going all out without a single second of hesitation. Think about children for a moment. When they face a new challenge, they don't hold back. They don't calculate the risks of looking silly. They just give it their all. That is exactly the energy the framework demands from us. If you need to sell to a major market influencer, you do the research, you spare no expense, and you push until they say yes. This requires abandoning the victim mentality entirely. Cardone emphasizes that success doesn't happen to you, it happens because of you. You are the main actor in your life, embracing challenges as opportunities rather than risks. That brings us to part 4, the power of obsession. But wait, how do you sustain that level of massive action without totally burning out? Well, according to Cardone, to make this work, you have to become totally, fiercely obsessed. A lot of people are terrified of going all in because they view it like a high-stakes game of poker. But the book argues that going all in on your own life, your own effort, and your own ideas is far less risky than gambling. You have to be deeply obsessed with your goals, dedicating every single drop of energy to them. And here's the secret benefit of obsession. When other people see how intensely devoted and unshakable you are, they naturally become attracted to your optimism. The idea spreads like wildfire. They start to believe in your vision and they will follow you on your journey. Now, many people fear putting themselves out there too much, right? They're terrified of overexposure. But according to the 10x rule, remaining in obscurity is the real danger. Being well-known and recognizable is vastly superior to hiding in the shadows. Just think of massive brands like Coca-Cola or Facebook. You see them everywhere, right? They don't worry about overexposure, they rely on it. The framework argues that you need to push past the fear and make absolutely sure people know exactly who you are and what you do. Sustaining this intense level of obsession requires mastering your emotions and your schedule. First up, you must ignore economic fears. During tough economic times, it's natural to worry, sure, but you cannot let the market's panic dictate your massive action. You also have to overcome the fear and pride that constantly block you from taking risks or accepting constructive feedback. And finally, you have to squeeze way more from your time. The source material shares a great anecdote about the author waking up an hour earlier every single day just to spend quality time with his daughter. He didn't sacrifice his massive 10x workload, and he didn't sacrifice his family. He just budgeted his time more fiercely. And finally, part 5, choosing meaningful targets. All right, we've built the engine, we've got the mindset, the action level, and the obsession. Now you have to point this massive 10x energy at the right objectives. Conventional wisdom says you should obsess over customer satisfaction, but tech giants like Google and Apple, they prioritize relentless customer acquisition. They put their energy into getting new customers constantly. Why? Because when you operate at a 10x level, you're naturally delivering above and beyond people's expectations anyway, which organically results in high satisfaction. The rule states that your primary target must be expanding your base, not just babysitting the one you already have. The framework suggests setting another massive target, total name recognition. You shouldn't just want to be a player in your industry. You want your name to be entirely synonymous with what you stand for. When people think of a smartphone, they think of Apple. When they think of getting a ride, they think of Uber. These brands didn't achieve this by setting realistic, average goals. They achieved it by targeting total market dominance. That is the level of name recognition you should be aiming your massive action toward. So, to actually execute this whole shebang, you need a system. First, list out your massive, seemingly impossible goals. Second, outline the precise 10x steps needed to get there. For example, if your goal is to sell 100,000 units of your product, you can't just tweak your ads. You might need to completely adapt your marketing budget and overall strategy to match that massive scale. And third, regularly review and adapt your list based on what is actually working and what isn't. You've got to be flexible in your tactics, but absolutely stubborn in your ultimate 10x vision. Which brings us to the ultimate question you have to ask yourself right now. Will you aim for mediocrity or will you embrace the 10x rule? We've seen how dangerous average really is, how massive action creates real results, and how true obsession attracts success. The methodology is right in front of you, but it requires you to take complete responsibility for your future. So what's it going to be? Are you going to settle for just getting by, or are you ready to push yourself to achieve your wildest dreams? Think about that as you plan your next move. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep pushing your limits.